Good evening. Before we officially call the meeting to order, Dr. Rhodes has an update for us.
So as you know, we had to postpone our external visit due to weather this past Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So we have been working with the cabinet and of course the external team on a makeup date for that. First of all, I'd like to really thank Stephanie McConnell. You would have not believed how this MDC was set up until Monday afternoon, actually, when we tore it back down. So she went to a lot of work. Custodian went through a lot of work, technology, and of course, cabinet getting ready for this. So really appreciate all those folks. But the only date that we could land on is at the end of April. It's April 28th. Through the 30th. So that April 28th would be the Sunday evening. We would begin at 4:30. Like we were going to do this past Sunday with introductions, welcome, district presentation, followed by a meal and conversation. And then of course the board interview with that external team. So we have locked in with that date. We've made that work with the external team. There were 3 members of that 10-person team that are not able to make that, so we're working on their replacements with the 2 external team leaders. So hopefully that can work with your calendar. It was really the only 3-day time slot that we could get in this late. So again, the external visitation will take place beginning Sunday, April 28th. And Monday and Tuesday will be their building visits and interviews and all those things. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the Open Meetings Act is posted in the room. Make reference to that. Sheila, can you call roll, please?
Matthew Peterson,
Present.
Emily Garrett,
Present.
Joanne Landry,
Present.
Cindy O'Connor,
Present.
Skip Altic,
Present.
Angela Blazy.
And we'll entertain a motion to.
I move to excuse Angela Blazy from the meeting. Second.
Emily Garrett,
Aye.
Joanne Landry,
Aye.
Cindy O'Connor,
Aye.
Skip Altic,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
And before I get too far along, I'm going to review the purpose and direction. The purpose of North Platte Public School District is to prepare our students to be productive, responsible citizens in a safe, caring, supportive learning environment. Our direction is to prepare every student for success through high-quality educational programs delivered by highly effective educators who use innovative, research-based strategies in a safe, supportive environment in collaboration with family, businesses, and community members. So we need a motion on the publication for tonight's meeting.
I move to approve the publication for the March 28, 2024 meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
I second.
Joanne Landry,
Aye.
Cindy O'Connor,
Aye.
Skip Altic,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Emily Garrett.
Aye.
And that passes. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
We move to approve the agenda for March 28, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting.
Second.
Cindy O'Connor,
Aye.
Skip Altic,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Emily Garrett.
Aye.
Joanne Landry.
Aye. And the pledge of allegiance. If you'll all I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll move on to the board engagement, and the first item under that agenda item is school visits. So if there are any of you that have been on school visits that you'd like to report, we'll do that during this time.
I have 2 of them. Didn't get to it in February. So on February 15th, Mr. Simpson and I visited Washington School. Mrs. Gale, the principal, gave us a tour, and we saw a lot of the new ways she had rearranged the school, which Stuart didn't know about and was very pleased with, by the way. She'd moved people in different rooms. The main move was they no longer use the modular for music. They brought it inside the building. And she said that works so much better. And I know that because one time I visited Washington, I went out there and I got locked out, so I had to go walk all the way. And that was in the winter. Had to walk all the way around to the front door. So everything's contained in the one building. Went very well, nice visit. We were there early, so we saw the kids doing walk club and coming into the building and parents coming in. And as usual, it was very well maintained building. Then Stuart and I on March 14th visited the Lake School. And the first thing we did when we walked into the building, they were having a bake sale. Fourth graders had arranged to have a bake sale where they're trying to raise money for new equipment for the playground. And the kids were all buying it, and it was really nice to see. And then we had a tour of the building, and I always find the lake interesting because they always have all these different things on the wall of all the projects that students were doing, had been doing, I mean, all the way through. Mrs. Tillman, we talked to her in her classroom. She talked about the math program she's piloting and talked about how it's going and different than the other ones she's piloted in the past, and because she's been with us a while. And it was really interesting conversation we had with her, what she liked about it, what she didn't like about it, and so forth. We had a nice visit, went down to the room that's music room now that they renovated, what was that, about 4 years ago?
I believe so, something around there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And had a nice visit, really very, very enjoyable again. And we're going to Lincoln this month.
You bet.
Okay.
I visited Madison Middle School last week. I was asked to judge their door decorating contest, so that was a fun experience. And while I was there, I kind of got just like a mini walk around the school. So that was good. Just to kind of follow up, when I had visited there last year, we had talked a lot about some schedule changes and some different things. And so it was nice to be able to follow up and see how that implementation has kind of carried into this year and adjustments that have been made and how that's going. And it still sounds like that's been a very positive thing for our students and our staff. So that was good to see. And of course, the doors were beautiful. So that was fun. And then a couple days later, I was at Cody Elementary with Mr. Rhodes and Dr. Rhodes. We got to be there for the unveiling of the engagement, which was cool to see the excitement. I'm always amazed when I go to Cody. I feel like their level of enthusiasm with their teachers is like, it's its own world in Cody Elementary. And so you walk in and like, sometimes I go there and they're dressed up, or they're, you know, the teachers are very engaged staff there. So it was cool to see their excitement and some of the things that they had going on in their building. Some of the ways that they've adapted and that they work together even that day, you know, classes going in and some of the teachers being out for training in the engagement lab. And if you hadn't known those things were going on, it was kind of like business as usual. So I was really impressed by just our staff and how they support each other in that building. So it was a good visit.
I was able to go to McDonald Elementary. It seems like a lifetime ago because it was on the 1st of March. So it was right after our last committee of the whole. But it was really fun to be able to be there and see all of the innovative ways that teachers are engaging students. There was a group that they were learning how to tell time, and they had giant hula hoops and they had set them up to look like clocks. And it was also fun because we went into a couple of different classrooms where teachers are teaching the same thing, but maybe just a slight variation in the way that they're teaching it. One teacher with the clocks was using dice for the kids to have to choose which number the hand was on, and then the other one, I think the teacher was just calling out the number, if I recall correctly. So And then, we went into another classroom. I was later told that I really appreciated this, that the teachers were nervous, because some of the terminology, of course, with the digestive system, when you're having to say it in front of other adults, maybe makes them a little bit nervous, but it's the appropriate terminology that, you know, medical professionals use. And so, it was really fun to see the kids, and they were, diagramming the digestive system. There was another class where they were, learning about fractions. And they had pizzas, and they had little pieces of paper, and they were, and each of the little pieces of paper represented a pizza topping. So it was pepperoni or the cheese or tomatoes or, you know, all of the, I don't know, maybe they had some creative pizza toppings too, I can't remember. But then they had to describe how much of their pizza, they had to put it into fraction form. So like half of my pizza has cheese, and a quarter of it has pepperoni, and all of those things. So, and then we also, I think this was a 5th grade class. They were, working on a shortened rendition of Midsummer Night's Dream. And, so it was really fun to see, all of the engaging ideas that students were involved in the school. And I think it made their learning really impactful. So it was good. My computer went to sleep, so. The next thing is, okay, the strengths training. So I was able to set that up with Sherry Becker. We're going to do that, with our June committee of the whole. So, right now we're scheduled to, I think we're going to come a little bit early. I'm not sure, have we set the time with that?
For the June 27th?
Yes.
No, we have not set it.
Okay, so I'll get back with you on a time. I need to maybe work with Sherry Becker and Dr. Rhodes on that a little bit, but.
The date is set.
The date is set for the 27th. Yep, so, and, I think do you think it'll work for all of you to come like an hour or so early? What would you like to do as far as time? I think that was what we were gonna do, maybe was talk.
That would be fine with me. Yeah.
I think it's far enough in advance that should be fine schedule wise.
Okay, and we'll try to get that out to you as soon as we can, what the time is gonna look like. She, I think, was hoping for maybe 2 hours with the board, so we'll just have to kind of see what the committee meeting looks like, and then her time with us.
Okay.
So,
One of the things when John visited with me about that is, if you remember, June and July at the regular board meetings, we generally, we'll have those 4 or 5 required hearings, according to statute. And so due to the fact that we're doing those, we usually do those right at the beginning of what is going to be a regular board meeting night. We could, and certainly probably will, shorten the agenda for that particular evening to make sure, you know, that you're not having to be here until 9:30 or whatever the case may be. So. Okay.
okay, and then next, Cindy and I and Stuart actually, and Emily was signed up but not able to go, which worked out because Stuart just took your place, so we didn't have to worry about how that worked out. And so we were able to attend the finance workshop, which was on the 19th. And Cindy, I guess I'll let you share a little bit first, and then.
Well, I will say that, at this financial workshop, they have a lot of information that they throw at us. And we could have been there for 2 days and they still couldn't have gone over everything. But, we talked a lot about budgeting, and they suggested to us that instead of waiting into the fall, like September, when we have budget meetings that the public comes, that they suggest we start this like in July, which was a good idea.
Yeah,
Because,
the conversation with the public.
yes,
Yeah.
with the public, And because they said monthly, as a board, we should monthly talk about budgeting. And they said the more that we get this information out to the public earlier, that it's better for all of us. So that was, to me, very good. We talked about, SPED, because that was a big expense that we're getting more money for this year. Because with them, and the public needs to understand that too, with SPED money, we have to spend it before we get it. And that is a big issue. I think that a lot of people, it doesn't really sink into them. But they went over a lot of that. They had great receipts and expense charts. Joanne and I, we did talk to Stuart about that they were so much easier to read. And to us, that would be easier to be, for the public to see exactly what differs every year or every month. Stuart, we did talk about, the schools that are non-equalized districts. And we are one of those, correct?
We're
We're
equalized.
equalized.
Right.
Okay, but for us being equalized, we're getting less money this year, is that correct?
What happened is that, when the foundation aid came into play, they basically just took away the foundation aid from our equalization aid. So really, for our most part, we didn't get additional money like a Maxwell or I would assume a Hershey got. We basically just got the same amount of state aid, they just moved the line items.
So that hurt us.
Yes,
That
I
hurt.
think one of the ways to think about equalized versus non-equalized. Equalized districts, according to the way the formula works, have the ability to raise revenue locally. So you're actually hindered by having in your district high value property valuations, because what the formula says then, they call it the local effort rate. What they say is, according to the formula, you can get that locally. And so that goes in on as a resource. And unless your needs really skyrocket, your state aid, the other fund of money that helps us with our annual budget, either goes down based on valuations or stays the same. And so equalized districts, it's all based on your local effort rate and the valuation that you have on your property.
Well, and that was something that for me with the budget and finance workshop, that it finally just like fully sunk in. And then listening to some of the conversations yesterday that the state legislature was having, one of the concerns that a lot of people in the East are having is that they're thinking that their equalization for some of the larger districts, that they're not gonna have equalization aid next year. And so that means that more of the burden goes to the property tax owners, because that's the way we've been funding the schools, is through property taxes. And so, but yeah, when they said that it's your needs minus your resources. And so that's how they determine whether or not you get state aid. And so, it actually is a really big deal that, you know, if the state determines that the property tax owners in North Platte can, you know, that they can shoulder all of that burden, which is what they've been doing, not necessarily in North Platte, but for Sutherland or Hershey, for example, then the state says, okay, you guys can take care of it all, and we're gonna spend our money elsewhere. And so it just goes to show that they really haven't been, there's a lot of discussion right now about whether the state actually has been funding schools appropriately or whether they haven't. Well, I think that just kind of, to me, goes to show that they haven't been, you know, that they've been putting more of the burden on the people locally instead of helping out at the state level. So,
And along with that, I guess I want to clarify something. The districts that are not getting equalization aid are still getting state aid. It's just in a different form. And a lot of times they would say to us, well, we're not getting state aid. Everybody was getting some form of aid. We just got it in equalization aid. Other districts got it in option enrollment aid. Now they're getting it in foundation aid, and we're not. So,
right.
yeah.
And that was what happened this last year with our equalization aid, is that some of it came in foundation aid
Right.
and some of it came in equalization aid, but it still equaled a lesser amount than
Than what we
we've
got.
been getting in the past.
Man, becoming an accountant.
And I'm gonna say this again, because I think the important piece, when you have a 10% increase in your total valuation inside that formula, it doesn't matter how they shift the dollars within the state aid formula. That state aid, the way the formula works, it's automatic that you're gonna go and potentially ask for more property tax dollars, and they're not gonna fund at the state level in terms of state aid. So the last 2 years in terms of the increase in valuation, which once again, we have nothing to do with the valuation of the
Right.
property. We've been hit hard the last 2 years with huge increases, our property owners have, and it does make it really difficult for a district like us that is equalized then to budget accordingly for the needs that we have. Because we can't, the state aid formula doesn't generate more funds for us. So,
Right.
Do you have anything else? Okay. So I was just gonna add a couple of things. One of the things that they talked about that I thought was really good, and we had a little bit of a conversation with Stuart, and I've had a little bit of a conversation with Dr. Rhodes about, was I've never seen that our district has had a formalized master facility plan. And so, I mean, we always know that our buildings have needs and that there's things that need to be done. And we've been really good, I think, at being able to meet those needs. But I think as we move forward and someday, hopefully will be far in the future, but someday Stuart won't be with us. And so I think, if we could have something on paper that says this is our facility plan, as we continue on, I think that would be something that would be really helpful for us.
Stuart to see his spreadsheet of repairs at some point.
Well, we have to take advantage of that in creating the master facility plan for sure, so.
Well, when we go over the discussion today on the budget side, we'll be talking a little bit on the social building and sort of what's happened with that over the course of time.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. So Cindy mentioned the budget workshop with the public. There were several graphs and charts that we pointed out to Stuart that we thought would be really good to help us, people like me who I kind of glaze over a little bit with the numbers. And so when I get the colorful pictures with the charts and graphs, my brain can just understand that a whole lot better. So let's see, and then there was they talked a little bit about the memorandum of understand, or let's see, was it? No, it wasn't. It's not memorandum of understanding, MOE.
maintenance of
Maintenance of effort. So it was just a lot on the state funding. They talked a little bit about some things that are going on with the legislature and how that could affect us, and we're still waiting for all of that to play out. Something else that was really helpful for me is, and this is, you can find this on the Nebraska Department of Education website, and each school district has one of these on the website. And so you can get on there and you can see everything with the funding and including like the net option funding and the amount of foundation aid we received, I think the amount of equalization aid, So all of that is stuff that you can find on the Department of Education website, and I actually came home and looked some of it up because I thought it was interesting to see. And I learned some things from that, so you can definitely see some of the school districts around us, why they like to have net option enrollment students, because for a lot of them, it is a significant portion of their budget. So very eye-opening to see some of that. So, yeah, overall, I would say it was a really good workshop. I'm glad that we went. And sometimes when you hear the same thing, Stuart does an excellent job of explaining it to us, but I think sometimes when you hear it from another set of mouths, or they explain it just in a little bit different way, and it helps make things click even better. So it was really good. I'm glad that we were able to go. And it was nice that it was here in North Platte. We didn't have to travel. Okay, final thing with board engagement is the board retreat on April 16th. We are still in the process of what that is going to look like. So if anybody has any questions or comments or things that you'd like to maybe know more about or have a question about, or maybe that you'd like to see us talk about at the board retreat, if you want to just get in touch with me, we can have a discussion about that.
Is that when we're addressing, like our board self-evaluation?
That will
Or
be part of it.
self-assessment?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. I figured so. Just.
Yeah. And right now we're scheduled for 10 to 2 on Monday. Okay. So, okay, so now we'll move into our regular agenda, and the first thing that we have is the math curriculum update. So I'll turn some time over to Vicki and Lindsay, and they can share with us what we're doing there.
Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about our math curriculum adoption. And doing so, we're gonna build a little bit of capacity and sort of what our process is when we go through a curriculum adoption. So our department supports student achievement by working with teams of teachers to develop a coherent K-12 curriculum. And that is framed around the state standards that are adopted by the State Board of Education. Curriculum and instructional materials are also considered in that whole entire process. The North Platte Public School District endorses the Nebraska standards as its curriculum. And those are standards that are designed by teacher teams from across the state of Nebraska on a 7-year revision cycle. So every content area outside of career and technical education go through a revision process where new standards are developed every 7 years, or in the case of career and technical education, it's every 5 years. And so when new standards come out, teaching and learning lights the fire, and we say it's time to take a look at those new standards, which also means that we're also considering new instructional resources for staff. So the state of Nebraska adopted new standards in September of 2022. Our framework goes through a 5-stage process. And so Lindsay and I are going to talk about those 5 stages and what has happened with our math curriculum writing teams. So after the state of Nebraska, the state board and our local board adopted the standards from the spring of 23 to the fall of 23, we worked with teams of teachers, K-12, to build their capacity in looking at high quality instructional materials and becoming familiar with the standards. So that work happens through professional development, and then our teacher teams come together during the summertime to actually work at framing those standards and really studying them. It's like they go back to school and start comparing standards that they were expected to teach in the previous cycle to what new standards have changed in that next cycle. So then in the spring of 24, which is now, we brought all of our elementary staff and our math content area teachers together to move into stage 2, which is our next slide. And so we also, during that time frame, spend time previewing what is considered high quality instructional materials. We have a platform and a Nebraska Materials Collaborative that help guide and facilitate that practice so that when we are considering instructional resources, because there's a lot of instructional resources out there. So we utilize a lot of Nebraska Materials Collaborative recommendations that the state of Nebraska makes to us, along with an organization called Ed Reports, where teams of teachers from across the nation actually vet all of the curriculum resources that box companies, big companies, small companies are producing for content areas. When we do that, we go through a series of meetings with our K-12 curriculum writing team, whereby we have presentations from those companies where teachers are actually getting their hands on the materials and they're filling out rubrics and basically grading or assessing, does the resource have everything that we believe that it's going to need in order for us to be successful in our classrooms to teach the content area standards that we've adopted. So during this school year, during this spring, our curriculum writing teams did their research and reviewed those high quality instructional materials and narrowed it down to 2 materials at each level that they are currently field testing. So as Mr. Altig had indicated, he had witnessed with Mrs. Tillman that she's field testing in her classroom right now, those curricular resources. So at the elementary level, they are piloting or field testing a resource called Eureka Math Squared and also Envisions 2.0. Envisions 2.0 is the current curriculum resource that we use with our K-12 math department. The secondary individuals also considered Amplified Desmos and a new series, McGraw-Hill and Reveal. So the secondary teachers had decided to move away from Envisions and consider these 2 newer, more robust, in their opinion, curricular resources. And so they have been spending weeks during the second semester field testing. We notify families when that's happening because obviously math changes. The whole idea during the field test is not to start something brand new, but to take the resource, the lessons that they have, and plug those resources into the standards that they would normally be teaching with the previous resource. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it at the classroom level with our teachers. And all of this is done, it's teacher driven, and Lindsay's role and my role are really just to facilitate the process so that they can move towards an actual decision.
Vicky, how do you decide where we're gonna field test things? Is it teachers that are a part of that team?
Yeah, that's a great
want to do
question.
that?
Yeah, so we have curriculum writing teams for each content area. So at the elementary level, the K-5 teachers sign up to be on those teams. So we have almost every elementary teacher on a curriculum content writing team. So some of them are maybe on the English team, some of them are on the math team, some of them are on the science team, and so on. At the secondary level, it's a little bit different. I don't give them much of a choice because we only have like 3 8th grade math teachers. And so we need all 3 8th grade math teachers to be reviewing those math materials because we've only got 3 of them and one person can't take that job on by themselves. And so those are the individuals that K-12 content area team are the ones that go through the training with the companies. They're the ones that fill out the rubrics and evaluate the ones that they are going to choose to field test. And we set up initial field test training for them. So when they actually take that resource into their classroom, they're prepared and ready to go. And we always do a huge shout out to the tech department as well. Because they're also having to set up those online platforms if some of the platform is through the computer. And so we're doing some integration and implementation through the technology department, and then providing that timeline for them to actually field test those resources.
So that brings us to stage 3, which is the stage that we're in right now, and that is making a choice and adopting which high quality material that we want to utilize in the future, and then planning for professional development. So currently we're in this process. It is a teacher-led process. We want to have their voice, and they ultimately make the decision because they're the experts in the field out there every day. So like Vicki said, we just really facilitate that decision-making process. They analyze the rubrics. They think about how it went with their field tests and what their students' opinions are. That's one thing they take into account too. And then they just weigh the pros and cons of each resource. And then we think about best practices around math and also what our beliefs are about good math instruction. And so they take all of that and kind of come to a decision and, try to come to a consensus for the most part. Then the next step is to implement, so that will be this summer. So as soon as we make our choice this summer, we will start our curriculum writing work that we do in the summer, and that is really designing our learning plans, our units of study, and formalizing all the assessments that we'll utilize in those resources. And then we'll also work on planning out professional development for the first couple of years and involve our teachers in what they would like that process to look like as well, to support them through that entire thing. And then the last step is really we continually analyze. So the first couple of years, we're working on that implementation stage, and then every year we revisit with our curriculum writing teams. We come together, everyone comes together in the summer. We look at what went well, what we need to tweak for the future, and then we continually make adjustments to improve overall learning.
And then you get to start all over.
Yeah.
And then and 6 years from now, we start all over again.
So how long does the field test run? Is it just a couple of weeks? Is it a whole term?
We do an entire unit. Well, we try as much as we have time for, but they like to pilot at least a whole unit of study. So there's about 6 to 8 units of study in every grade. So they like to do a unit from beginning to end so that they can see how the online platform works, how the assessments work at the end and throughout the unit.
And the high school had 2 different ones that they were
The high
looking
school only chose Reveal.
at? Okay.
Unfortunately, this is something that we run into oftentimes with our high school level, is that the resources out there are very limited. And so they had vetted 2 other ones. They were really interested in the Amplify resource, but that's not going to be fully designed by the company for another 2.5, almost 3 years. And we just felt like we couldn't wait. And so that also plays into it as companies and organizations are making shifts in conceptual math and designing and developing new materials. Usually that high school level is the level that is always, sort of at the back end of that creation. And so Savvis or Envision, which is the one that we currently use, they did take a look at that again and considered, is that something that we want to continue to stay with the upgrades? Or do they want something new, that really embeds that conceptual math thinking? And so they took a look at several and then just really took a deep dive into Reveal. So this last term, most of those classrooms, those math classrooms are implementing units of study from Reveal, which is a McGraw-Hill product,
So, and then how do you determine because I'm assuming there's goals that need to be reached. How do you determine if the curriculum is the best tool for helping meet those goals, other than like teacher feedback? And do you look at, are there test scores? Are there, what are some of the things that you look at to determine if that's going to be the best resource for our students?
before deciding or post deciding in the analyzing stage?
Maybe both. Let's go with both. What kind of goals, what kinds of things do you look at goal wise before? And then how do you determine after if that met the goals, I guess?
Okay, I think when you're thinking about goals, we set a kind of a course of vision of what we want our math classrooms to look like. I think we also have to consider what is the type of learner that we have before us, because our type of learner today is very different than what we had even 7 years ago when we first went through this, when I was first in this position. And so I think that shifts. I think you also have to consider sort of that preparedness with assessment. And so that's one of the reasons that we want them to field test, because they have to be able to analyze whether or not students are finding success with the way that the units of study are mapped out. And then they're trying those assessments to see if students are in fact successful with that. We also build a lot of capacity in the instructional shifts within the standards. So the teacher teams, when they design new content area standards, they're also outlining what they consider to be instructional shifts in the way that content area is taught. So what is the research telling us in best practice? And oftentimes that instructional shift is kind of like a goal. We know that we have to meet those instructional shifts in order to be successful, help students be successful in math. And so we have to ensure that the curriculum that we're looking at or the resource that we're looking at is in fact in alignment with that and also supports those instructional shifts. And oftentimes that has currently probably been the challenge in the last 7 to 10 years is the shift in the state standards moving to more college and career ready standards than just grade level standards. And so there are both of those things that we have to think about in terms of goals. Does the material help us prepare kids for career readiness? And does it help kids prepare for college readiness? And then the analysis is just like, that's ongoing over the next 5 years before the next cycle starts over again, is we're constantly analyzing through formative assessments, summative assessments, our interim assessments, your readiness checks, your benchmark checks that exist within the units to see how students are doing with, successfully, what they're doing with math successfully or not. And then if they're not, adjusting that core one instruction so that we can meet the need of that learner. So I don't know if that fully answered your question or not.
I'm wondering, would it be appropriate to say, so we have board policy that we do adopt content area standards from the Nebraska Department of Education. So in my mind, when I think about that becomes the curriculum. Then we prioritize with our curriculum teams from that, and we start to develop unit guides. And through those unit guides, to me, what your goals are those learning targets that you'll see in every classroom when you go across our district. And they are the unit guides are extremely comprehensive. But to me, those are the goals. So I think the change in probably the last 20 to 30 years is you used to get that textbook, which was your high quality material, and that was your curriculum. And that isn't the process that we have anymore. It's the standards. We have teachers work on the priorities of those standards, develop their unit guides, what they want kids to learn and be able to know and do for learning targets. And then the high quality materials support the instruction for those unit guides. Would that be, can we say that?
Yeah.
Is that a way to talk about learner goals and I don't know if that's what you were asking or not. But.
Well, and I'm kind of thinking in terms of when we do state standards testing. So, I mean, because ultimately that's one of the things that we want to see and parents want to see is that their students are achieving the benchmarks or exceeding them or whatever, for the state standards testing. And so how are we able to assess that other than through the testing or, can we see that they're progressing to the goals for those tests as we go?
That actually is a part of our strategy 1, and that is our balanced assessment system that we have in place.
Yeah.
So the creation of your formative assessments, which teachers are gathering that data on a daily basis. And then that leads into the summative, and both of those are aligned to the unit guides, learning targets, which in turn are aligned to the state standards. And again, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves because you're stealing a little bit of my thunder.
No, I didn't want to say anything because I know you're going to talk about this.
That's something that we really talked about as a district is how are we utilizing our CFAs, our common formative assessments, and CSAs, our common summative assessments. And what are we doing with that data to make decisions about what reteaching looks like, what interventions look like, what enrichments look like. But at the end, all of those components are aligned to that first stage and those content area standards that come out when, every 5-6 years, so.
Yeah, so I think kind of what I'm understanding is, in an ideal world, if our curriculum, we've adopted an appropriate curriculum and our CFAs and our CFAs are appropriately aligned to the state standards. Our state assessment data should not be a surprise to us as a district, because we should
We
see
should be
that
able
same
to predict
comparable data.
based on how far we've gotten in the curriculum and when that spring assessment is given.
Right.
But yes,
Okay.
yeah,
So with math curriculum, I think of, and I'm sure it's true for a lot of subjects, but math especially, you've got your classes like geometry and things like that, but then you've got your calculuses and things I stayed away from. Do we find that it's the curriculum we adopt or whatever program we go with, are there differences at whatever level you're at with those? And how do we consider that if maybe at the lower level, it's better with one curriculum than another one, it would be?
So the way that the math standards are designed at the secondary level is that they go all the way through 8th grade standards, so grade level standards. When you go into high school, then it is grouped. So you have like your 9-10 standards and you have your 11-12 standards, and then you have advanced topic standards. And so almost all of the companies that we review for field testing go algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then they stop in terms of the sequence. So the vertical alignment stops with algebra 2. As we move into those advanced topics, because the majority of those advanced classes that we offer at the high school are dual credit through Mid-Plains Community College, our curricular resources, then our textbooks are then in alignment with the college level classes. So because those are dual credit, a lot of companies offer like a college algebra or a calculus or a pre-calc or trig and stats, but because we offer all of those as dual credit, our dual credit teachers default to the list that is suggested by Mid-Plains Community College, and they usually are then utilizing the same textbooks that our collegiate level or our faculty out at Mid-Plains would be utilizing.
So we have our classes that we know our students are gonna have to take.
Yeah, for graduation.
And that's what we focus on with
Yeah.
our curriculum. Okay,
Mhm,
that
yeah.
makes sense.
Mhm. It's a great question though. Great question.
Okay. Is there any other question?
I just think it's great. Again, I've said this numerous times. I was there when we started the standards and assessments. And Tom Hammond and I were the first two that went to any workshop or anything on. But it has expanded, beyond that, but still the idea that teachers are involved, and that's what started. I can remember one of the first things in the first 95, I think, talked about, you need to have your teachers involved in this. You just can't have administrators saying, this is what you're gonna do, boom, here you go.
And
So
our
I'm glad,
resources keep
Yeah.
improving. Every year
Yeah.
they get better.
and I just think, and I see, because I've been up here when you've been working, there's a lot more teachers involved than there were way back in the day when it first started.
Well, and I think it's important to note, one of the goals, when I first came into this position 7 years ago, and we've been really blessed by the board and also by the finance office, that the goal that I had at the time that I started was to ensure that our curriculum, our resource adoption was in alignment with the standards revision timelines that the Nebraska, Department of Education was putting out. And that we weren't just randomly adopting materials when, we felt like it was all of a sudden necessary. We really needed to get in alignment with new standards, review, build capacity, learn. So we know what it is that we need to look for in a new curricular resource, look at those high quality instructional materials, and then sit with those for another 5 to 6 years before that cycle happened again. And that was better. I hope, we're hopeful that that's been better budgetary wise too, because then we know when those curriculum adoptions are coming, and those content area standards are needing that financial support to invest in that high quality instructional material. It's changed a little bit with career and tech ed, obviously, because they're now every 5 years, but that's because industry standards change so much faster than those core areas, so. a thank you to the board over the past several years and with what we're going into with the math adoption and the finance office for supporting the teachers and in the work that they're doing, so.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the budget with Stuart.
As I share my screen here. Okay.
Didn't even need help.
No, I did not.
Good job.
I did not. It's fine. Fine. You know, first of all, before we get into, the budget calendar, with Vicky and Lindsay, before COVID, we were able to smooth out, if I want to use it, and that's a term in more of the finance area, trying to smooth out what you're trying to do so that you don't have these hills and valleys in what's going on. And we were doing a very good job on smoothing out how much money to put into curricular resources. Once COVID hit, and once we had reestablished that curricular adoption process from the state, they saw curricular resources just skyrocket. And along with that, a lot of times in the past, we get a lot of material free of charge. And now we're not seeing some of that. So a lot of times we're seeing costs coming in that we were not familiar with. And we're trying to, once we get through this math adoption, to get back to somewhat of a smoothing and maybe increase from where we were, but trying to set aside money in that process so that we can do it. And we'll talk more about that when we get down into the finance area about what I try to do so that we don't have those hills and valleys in the process. But hopefully we're doing something to assist not only teaching and learning, but various areas in there. When the three of us attended that finance workshop, one of the items they mentioned was a budget calendar. And I have been doing a budget calendar from going back to the start of when I first came to North Platte. Now it's been modified over the course of years just because of, when our finance committee meets, when we're seeing state aid come in, and a few other items, but at least it gives us a course of what will happen during the school year. Now, when we were out there, Carl started talking about, well, in January you do this and you go through December. Mine does not do that. Mine starts in September because we're putting to bed the budget for that new year. And then in the process, we need to start building blocks of what we need to do for the next school year. And so we need to make sure not only us as administration, but you as a board members understand all the little blocks that have to go in to build up to that budget. Because, trying to throw out a $56 million budget is fairly easy, but trying to help everybody understand it so they know what each building block takes place is a process. So hopefully I've put together, and I look at it every year, and I in the past, the finance committee would at least look at this. If you remember though, if, for Joanne's purposes, a more of a visual, we had a clock that we looked at and what happened in September, October, November, because we're very much concerned about certain points in time on what is happening on the budget calendar. And, the big one we talked about is the last Friday enrollment, but then from there, some of the other pieces are a major concern. And we went over this last month in regards to the poverty program, the ELL program, and how that plays a significant factor in our state aid calculation. From there, we start looking at our annual financial report. We start looking at where the state will be coming out with our cost grouping, as well as what our cost per pupil is. So in that, you can go over this piece. Take this. Sorry, I'm trying to run.
Mr. Simpson, is your intention then to put in the committee of the whole where you have finance committee on this calendar.
Correct, and so if you look at January of 24, February 24, April of 24, we have the committee of the whole, so that you can see that in the past, it would have been the finance committee would have been looking at the budget in some capacity every month. I did modify it as we went into January and February of the committee of the whole, so that you can get an idea that we're all part of the whole. I think coming up now is, and Kevin is gonna address this a little bit more, but I put other items in here, not just what I have to be aware of, but okay, I'm working them, I'm getting it there. But like in April, you know, we're very much concerned about the reduction in force from April 15th. So a lot of times we're looking at dates within our calendar as a school district to make sure we have all the pieces in place so that when we move forward into, you know, the next coming months, that we put together a very good and concise budget after further discussion. So I'm not gonna go into that because it's a lot of information, but if you have time, Matt, we can go sleep. You'll always, you'll be able to look at that. Now, the next slide that I have up there is our building fund, and we have allocated resources toward the building fund over the course of the last multiple years. In that, what we want to do is we want to try to attack what Joanne was talking about on creating a facility plan and improvements. And a lot of it in the past has been toward roof replacement or something that is very much a concern on our mind now. And I go through those items. I have gone through those items with the finance committee over the course of the last few years. I can look at Skip. I could actually look at Joanne that have sit on the finance committee. Matt's been the longstanding member, but we
And get ready.
no. But, you know, so that we can get an idea of where we are with the building fund. Big one is we always want to make sure that we maintain our roofs. If we don't maintain our roofs, excuse me, obviously, we have a lot of infrastructure that we're going to be dealing with if we don't. So we want to make sure that's number one on our focus. And then from there, we try to address within the committee of the whole now, what would be a priority moving forward? And right now, and it's a year ago, we adopted the bid for the Performing Arts Center. Because that our facility at the high school is 20 years old. 21 years old. And in that, you know, we needed to upgrading the lighting as well as the, Ryan keeps calling it something and I'm losing. Controls, thank you. We want to make sure we have controls in place. And that's been a process. We've had it on the budget for the last few years, and, you know, we're looking at this summer to be completed. Along with that, ESSER's money on the HVAC construction that we've done at Adams, McDonald, and now the final one at Eisenhower have to run through the building program. So when we've adopted all of the HVAC projects that we're doing, we've ran those through ESSER money within the building funding. You can see those dollars. So when we talk about next year, no matter what, and I'm trying to make sure I roll up here. We still have to allocate some money in the ESSER's program because we're probably not going to get the full amount expended in fiscal year 23-24. We're going to be spending some few dollars in 24-25 so that we can finish out that grant. We have to have it expended by September 30th, and if we have all pieces into place, we'll be fine. It's just when we'll get the submission from the contractors to get it taken care of. So we have to have those expenditures or that budget authority done. Now, right now, when you look at it, the other piece is I said, all the Performing Arts Center will be completed in 23-24, but in 24-25, I still give myself a little bit, and that may be modified over the course of the summer. based upon getting the project done and getting the bills into place. And so we always want to make sure that we have some budget authority, because if we don't, and we go into something, then we all of a sudden have to try to figure out either having a adjusted budget, and we have to go in through hearings and so forth to get them taken care of. So I try to make sure as we look at some of these other funds, we have that budget authority so we don't have to come back to the board for modification. And then finally, hopefully looking out into 25, 26, we're back down to when we levy 750,000 in property taxes, we have certain projects that we want to do. Number one, roofs always, and then finally other projects that will be determined whether we have a facilities review or just conversations of the committee of the whole as we move forward, similar to what we've done in the past with our finance committee.
And some of this right now with the property taxes is going to be dependent on what the legislature comes up with.
Correct. It's going to be what the legislature does and where we are and, getting closer to June, July, and August as far as support for that.
I might have missed this, but what are the clocks?
Oh, we had to upgrade, high school, 21 years old.
Yeah.
All the clocks at the high school started drifting. And we would be within, 5, 10, 15 minutes off. And even though they were digital, and so it was just, we had to upgrade our clocks. So we went through the process of taking bids and getting that taken care of. I think we brought it to the finance committee a year or two ago.
You brought a lot to us, Stuart.
I know. So that's what we look at. So I think along with a facility plan, this will help solidify where we're going to go with our building fund in the future. The next one is our capital purpose undertaking fund. What that is for the board is we did HVAC projects at Buffalo, Cody, and Washington. And then we also issued bonds for Lincoln Elementary. In that, we were able to do that. I'm going back probably 7, 8 years ago. And no, 9 years ago. We got all of those projects done and we've just been slowly paying off that. Well, as you can see in the course of our bond project or our projects in the QC Puff, for the 24-25 is our amount of our bonds that we're going to be paying for is going to be less. And you're going to say, well, why are you doing less when you owe $1.8 million? Well, no matter if it's a general fund, the building fund, the QC Puff, when you adopt a property tax request in September, based upon valuations, those don't go into effect until January of the next year. So the taxes that we levied for 23-24 of $1.9 million are now starting to come in on January of 24, which will then be collected by December when we'll just say $1.9 million. And then in the process, that's why we'll have the $1.8 million there to expend, because we will in December write a check for roughly, $843,000 to make sure that we have those funds in place moving forward. And then finally, we'll have the remaining portion of the bonds paid off in 25, 26. And you can see we'll be levying for those and moving forward. So I think the biggest thing that I wanted to address here is that number one, you're going to see a reduction in the property tax request in the QC Puff. Number two is just to give you a better understanding of how property taxes come in for the district. You may think, well, you levied so much. Well, yes, but those funds don't come in until next year. And second of all, because of how we pay the bonds, we'll be able to pay them off in December. That series in December of 24. But it falls within the 24-25.
And what's our levy max on that?
It's whatever we need. It's not under the $5 levy.
Isn't there
The
a
dollar-
cap on that though, or on the?
There's-
Or is it?
There is, but we had issued the bonds for Lincoln before that cap was in place, so we were grandfathered. But because if you can see, we're dropping our levy down to, we'll just say roughly a penny. In that, now all of a sudden, we fall back under that $3, 3 cent levy. So,
There is a cap on special bill. Statutory.
yeah. We've just never hit it because we've always been so low. I never.
Is it
paid
still
attention.
is it still 14 cents?
Yes,
That's,
yes.
so you can, you know, and some districts have the, you know, the nice problem to decide then if they're gonna levy a little bit more, if they fall underneath the $5 in the special building fund, if they have really big projects that they need to get done. And a lot of districts, that's been kind of a contentious conversation with the legislature.
Right.
Because they believe that those should be questions asked of your taxpayers, and the bond question should go out as opposed to levying those kind of dollars. And then keeping holdover dollars for 3 or 4 years and building that to build a building or whatever the case would be, so. Pretty high cap, really,
Right.
14 cents.
Right.
Pretty high cap.
But but North Platte Public Schools has always been, 2-3 cents, and that's about all they've been able to manage. The next piece, within there is our depreciation fund. And let me step back and say the depreciation, the employee benefit, the activity, the cooperating fund. I just envision if I have any other ones. Those four aren't in essence controlled by property tax dollars. They're just a budget of expenditures of what you can do in the district. Now, we do transfer dollars into the depreciation employee benefit fund, but they're not really, there have to be money in the general fund to transfer depreciation. But what we're going to talk about here is why do we put money into depreciation? What the purpose behind it is. And I've never been on the other side in public accounting. But I understand it from my friend, because in public accounting, businesses and or other entities have to set aside money within their operations for building of or repairing of their infrastructure that they have. Well, for us in a public school setting, they said, no, you have, number one, the special building fund to build buildings, or you have other ways of setting aside funds to support what you need to do in the district. So with that, I've tried to give you somewhat what the state has laid out as far as a depreciation fund is for. But then in the process, when we go through and start establishing our depreciation fund for next year, we also establish within the general fund what we're going to do. And you can see this in my document on a monthly basis at the board meeting, but every year I try to transfer, and we'll just start with track, 50,000 for the track, because at some point in time, when we're about 7-8 years into it, and we could be hitting sort of the lifespan of the track, not the subsurface, because when we redid the track about 9 years ago, we really did improve the subsurface and put in a good asphalt base. It's just the running surface that we're gonna have to deal with. Bus replacement, always we want to make sure that whether it's our coach buses or our yellow buses that are around town are taken care of. Turf replacement, we have been putting money away for the last one, which was about 8 years ago. We could be coming up where we need to replace a turf, but we'll be watching it. Obviously the high school principal, activities director and so forth do give us information in regards to how that turf is holding up, but we have been putting money away. So we do have that resource there if we do have to come up. So then we're getting into curriculum, teaching and learning. And I talked to you about smoothing, and I've tried to put money away. Now I've addressed it within here that we try to put money away in a textbook replacement. Now, with technology and what Vicki and Lindsay have done with our teachers and using computers, a lot of times it's now redirected into software, but we're trying to make sure no matter what we have, whether it's textbooks or software, that we have those resources put aside so that they're not worried about that. They're worried about what are we gonna do in the classroom at this point in time.
And we still provide the textbooks for dual credit,
Correct.
unless they take the class at the college.
Right, right.
Okay.
And those textbooks come out of a different, we'll just say a pot of money. It comes out of our activity fund where we set aside money within dual credit for those textbooks if they need to do. Or if they have a math class that they need calculators or some other piece, then our high school principal will use that dual credit in support of that classroom. New series textbooks, we had set some money aside on that one because as you adopt a curriculum, sometimes we think we have enough or we want to, number one, bring in math. So we may have to pay a little bit and we want to try to make sure we put some money away for that. Program review textbooks, once again, the same way. We just want to make sure we have some money set aside. Tennis courts. Joanne and I are avid people. We want to make sure our tennis courts are taken care of. We've been putting money aside. We had those courts resurfaced. My daughter was in, I think I was junior, so that's 17, so 8 years ago. We had them resurfaced. Obviously, you know, the coaching staff as well as high school principal will let us know as those go down. We do look at it, but right now they're holding up, but we want to put money away because if we do, it's not a small dollar to get that taken care of. Once again, we want to make sure as we go through, all of our teachers have new computers of 52, you know, so we put money away. So when we go through another adoption of new computers, you know, new apples, we'll do that one. And then obviously we want to make sure we have band uniforms taken care of. So we try to put these pieces away because we know that we're going to need it down the road. But if we put bits of it away, we can build it up instead of all of a sudden getting hit right away.
And a lot of our activities, fundraising in support of the things that they do. So.
Right, right. And we have those in activity fund also. And then finally too, it's activity depreciation report. Just want to let you know, we have money put aside for activities, whether it's a high school. We do provide some travel support for our middle school activities. And then just in general activities, for example, when I want to say our cheerleaders, pacers, mock trial go to state, then in the process, we do have some money set aside for that. And, you know, as you can see, you know, I say MPH athletics, it's activities because we have speech included there. But in the process, you know, people now with streaming services, with YouTube, with everything else, we're seeing less of attendance because they can sit at home on their phone. So we need to make sure that we can continue to provide those opportunities for students. So we have to put some funds away from the general fund in there for that support.
Have we considered, because I mean, just looking strictly at numbers, obviously, we expend a lot more on activities than we do bring in. Have we looked at changing up how we do the live stream and those kinds of things so that we kind of try to fix that discrepancy? Because, like I mean, that's obviously something that I do for a living, so I see the value in that, of course. But I'm just wondering, like, is that something that we could have advertisements in our live stream? Instead of doing a live stream, could we do a a weekly recap at the end of the week that still gives those students that experience, but maybe wouldn't pull from people coming to the events, or can we have a $5 pay-per-view charge, or, you know, have we looked into options so that it doesn't, obviously there's educational value in doing that, but I don't want it to be taking away from having these things monetarily make sense.
And some of the schools do have this Strive instead of a YouTube TV, so to speak, where they have to pay for that service to get it. Obviously with our continual change in activity director, that subject that was brought up, I want to say a couple of months ago on, you know, can we look at something else? And we were mentioning, well, as the new one comes in, we will at least ask those questions, because I know, I'll say my daughter in Waverly, they have to go to Strive to watch some of their football games. So
How much of that is us for, I mean, like the Post does their own thing.
Right, so that's
we don't
not
have
us.
any control over
no,
what they do. And
they do, and they get the ads and
Yeah.
everything else. So we could at least ask some of those entities
a way to
about
figure
how-
out some sort of affiliation agreement or something then.
Right.
Yeah, because all of that is great, but at the end of the day, if it's
Costing
costing
us-
us money to
Right.
do it, and it's costing us money in revenue that we're no longer getting,
Right.
then we have to look at, does that make sense, or is there a better way to do it? So I think those are good conversations to have.
No, yep, I agree. So that's depreciation, and any other questions about? You get the little chunks, so as we build up to the general fund, then we'll start putting those bigger blocks.
I have one question
Uh-huh.
on the tennis courts. They're the ones over at the park, correct?
They're the ones, no, these are the ones
High
that
school.
on high school.
Yeah,
they're all.
And actually Madison too, if we have to do Madison
Okay.
too. So those, I'm only doing those. This isn't, has no bearing on the tennis courts.
Okay.
And we haven't entered, if we do, we'll be entering into agreement. We'll bring it to the board on that one, like we did the rec center for the swim.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to roll into the grants, Stuart?
I will roll right into the grants. What I want to really address here is that North Platte Public Schools has gone through a transition on grants. So 2-3 years ago, when we had to deal with ESSERS 1, ESSERS 2, and ESSERS 3, our grants grew over to $10 million at one point in time. And as we look at the budget for this year, for the 24-25 school year, our grants obviously are gonna go down. We'll probably have a little bit of, we won't have expenditures, but we will have revenue coming in because of how the state, and I'll talk to that in a little bit, right? In a little bit in regards to how the state money comes in. But otherwise, you can see now, based upon the budget that we have for our grants, we've gone from $10 million down to $4.4 million. And we keep a little bit extra in budget authority and grants like we do other areas to make sure if, for example, like Carrie does a wonderful job for Kids Club, and she gets grants going in, and if we need some extra expenditure authority, we do have that. Or I know Brandy is working at getting a couple of crime commission grants, and if she has that opportunity, then we will make sure that we have those budget authority accordingly. But for the most part, right now, our major grants that I've always talked about is our, I could probably update this. Thank you for having me go through this. I call it NCLB, but it's actually ESSA grants. I just keep using the same spreadsheet over and over. The other piece is our IDEA grants. And those two are big chunks, over $1 million each that we have to deal with. And then obviously we get smaller ones going down. And then we're dealing with obviously ESSERS 3 now and the conclusion of that grant process. We have other ones. Our sixpence is it's a continuation grant that we always have, similar to ESSA. And then our preschool grant is Lindsay, a growth, is it a
Expansion.
expansion? Thank you. our expansion grant for preschool. So some of these you may not see in the future, but you may see now. Now, when you look at the reimbursed revenue, you're going, well, how can that be? Because if I look at the financial report, Stewart's getting in tons of money coming in for grants. I say tons. If we go to the next page, it's, hang on here, gotta run it. If we go to the next page, it shows all the prior year revenue that comes in. It comes in the course of 4 to 5 months, you know, and if you look at it, you could see in December, I finally got 193 from the IDEA program. So it's not just, oh, great, Stewart submits grant reimbursements for IDEA or ESSA, and all of a sudden, I'm gonna get that money next week. I'm gonna get that money in the course of 3 or 4 months. So for example, on IDEA, we finally got the grant approved in January. We submitted our expenditures and we're still waiting, and I have to reach out to them. But, you know, that's 2 months now without revenue coming in for there. ESSA, or Title I and Title II Part A, that grant, and it wasn't anything other than the State Department, you know, having a myriad of other issues and not having enough staff, didn't get that approved until the 1st of March. I turned around and got that submitted, so we're sitting, waiting for those funds. But we're still dribbling in on all prior year funds, and that's why I have 2 different areas, prior year and revenue, because I gotta watch, can I get some revenue coming in on our regular grants? And can I am getting revenue from prior year grants.
So are all of these grants reimbursed after we turn in our expenditures and they review everything?
Yes, yeah, it's not we get it up front. We have to submit it.
Which goes back to our cash flow discussion we had several months ago, is
Correct.
we don't know when this money is going to be coming in, and we have no control over it, and so.
And that's a good example, Matt, because I submitted the second quarter of our ESSERS 3 money that we needed for the regular budget and our building fund. And I submitted to the state, and then I emailed the person that I know I work with on it, and I said, can somebody look at this? Because obviously that goes back to 2021, because I know they're probably only focusing on 2024. So I want to make sure that they're looking at it. Do you have a cash flow problem? I wouldn't be asking you if we didn't. So what I'm saying is that, you know, I try to make sure that people know that we're out there and we need the funds accordingly. So my next step is that, you know, we submit salaries only, which hopefully can limit the time that they're gonna look at it and get around and turn around and get it back to us as best we can. So, other than that, you can go through it and look at it. The front page is what I look at, with Janelle, on a monthly basis, because we go through what grants have we submitted, and we've submitted the big ones. We're probably right now dealing with 21st Century and others that Carrie has. And then other than that, we're just waiting for funds to come in.
Do we have a process where we look for grants?
Yes, we do. I mean, I know Carrie looks for them, Brandy looks for them. Brandy works with the Crime Commission in regards to, you know, items that she needs for hers. Carrie's always working with Beyond School Bells and a few other people down at the State Department to improve or get some additional funding for her. Other than that, we probably have to reach out to a grant writer and ask those questions. Other questions about the grant? Or, yeah, about grants, finance. So next month, I'm looking at, you know, obviously we'll start building on the general fund and some of the items that I'm doing there.
Okay,
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Stuart.
Mr. Mills.
Hang on, there it goes.
Find my document.
Maybe as Mr. Mills is getting connected here, I think the point being with grants and sharing that information, you can see that we expend a lot of dollars out of grant funds. And the point being is that if you don't have a reserve or cash on hand, that does create a big time cash flow. There is no rhyme or reason on a particular grant on the length of time it takes for the State Department to approve that reimbursement that we submit. But I think recently it's been at least 2 months.
Yes.
Times 2 to 4 months to get reimbursement. So we've spent those dollars, 4 months, a third of the year previously, and we're waiting for reimbursement. So really, the only guaranteed revenue that we know that we can predict on a monthly basis right now is state aid. You get 10 payments of state aid, is that right? And then sped reimbursement has been at 80%, and we kind of can predict that. Those are the 2 revenues that we can predict. We can predict the percentage of property taxes, but you know how that fluctuates on getting two big months where we get a lot of property tax and then having to sustain that for the other 5 months. So that is and the other issue is that we're working in two annual budget years for our school budget. So Stuart has to predict at the end of a budget cycle what taxes are left with the county treasurer. Because remember, the new taxes don't go into effect until January, and we started school. And our budget year started September 1. So that's a big component to budgeting as well. And how accurate, Mr. Simpson, generally are you on the taxes that are left at the county?
I can look historically because I have multiple years, and I can see that, for example, if I'm getting 1.3 million this month, I can look back last year or the previous year and make sure, okay, is it in line or is it not? So that I know that we should be getting that amount of money. And if something would happen where it's less or more, then it becomes a question. For example, this was odd this year, but you always know in February you get your state apportionment. Well, for some reason, they sent it in January, which was odd. They've never done that before. I don't know if it was state trying to be nice, cash flow, whatever the case may be. So property taxes and some other state funds are very hard to predict.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something that I appreciate right now with your job is especially when, we don't know from one year to the next what to expect from the state, then, to try to predict what's going to happen and then to try to plan for any contingencies.
Right.
There's a lot to consider, so I really appreciate that.
Well, and that's why they have the budget calendar that it has, so that I can at least know certain things coming in, what's going to be done.
Yeah, I will mention, just within this last week, there's a school district in Iowa that I saw that they had to cut, I think it was like $3.8 million, I believe, from their budget. And so they're looking at a reduction of 50 staff members. And so, it's one of those things that just as things are shifting and changing and, you just really hope that we don't get ourselves, with what the state does and everything caught up in something like that. So thank you for all the work you do. Okay.
Okay, Dr. Rose had asked me to put together a little vacancy report. So looking at this, let's see here. I can touch these screen. I was touching my. There you go. There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about is not just looking at locally, but also look at the state too. So just real quick, because I know we're on a time thing tonight. If you look at the state, 908 teaching positions and 24% were not filled last year. So just to kind of give you an idea, and then you can see the rest of them up there, and I think the big one that has come up for me is elementary education. You can see it's number 2 now. So that before, in the past, we would have, use a Stewart word, gobs of applications, and now we don't have those applications. So I just wanted you guys to see that a little bit first. You got Victor running computer. And we tested it beforehand too. So the categories, what I've done here is I just put down the number that resigned and then the number that was hired. And then the next screen will kind of break down a little bit more, but let you kind of gander at that for a minute to look at, those that we've resigned and then the amount that, we hired back. So to give you some good numbers there, those are what those numbers indicate. So I went back to 17, 18, and you can see that that's where we started with 40 resigned or retired and then 37 hired. They can just use those same numbers all the way down that chart to see, what we've been doing. And the big piece that I think I want to point out really is that 2021, that's where we had to do a lot of shifting of staff. I was going back through my notes after Dr. Rose asked me to put this together. Man, I had notes everywhere because we had to move staff, because that's where we had that drop in enrollment. And all those individuals that we lost that year. So those are the basic numbers. Then obviously, where we're at right now, 23, 24, 31, 27. That's as of the couple of days ago. And then those are the positions obviously that we're looking for. So the turnover rate, if you look at, it's probably a little bit higher than 10%. I put 10%, but if you look at their turnover rate, it's pretty consistent. When you look at that bar graph and the numbers, we're pretty consistent of where we're at. So what we try to do is obviously, you know, we're going to grow our own. We're doing that process with the parent teacher program, career fairs, advertising, marketing, everything that we can do. We went into international hiring. We did that last year with seven Filipinos. So we're trying to do everything possible to look at that turnover rate. And obviously our goal is to retain. We want to put our money all in retaining. All of our discussion this afternoon has been about that. And in my mind, the way I view things is retaining our staff. Recruiting, we don't spend as much money because we want to get them here. We want to retain them through the teaching and learning, through the special education, through everything that we do today. So yeah, we're seeking education champs for elementary math, English, science, special education, music position. So we're ready to go. We're just, we're at that point of the year where contracts are locked in. We only have 2 remaining. And then obviously other districts are doing the same. So now we're looking at those individuals that maybe not got a job in the, you know, eastern part of the state or somewhere else and start to come this way, or maybe a retired teacher. So right now, those are the positions that we're looking at. Any questions?
For some of those, like journalism or music, or I guess really any of them, we have a plan B in case we're not able to get those filled.
And B, C, and D.
I was gonna say, in a lot of cases, there's a C and D as well.
Yeah, and we're working on those now, and we've already worked on a few other ones. So that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, we have to have plans. And the high school administration team has been phenomenal with everybody else of filling those gaps. And so last year when we looked at, we needed 2 science teachers, so we shifted a little bit of that to the college and the English, found out we didn't need it. So going back to Emily's point, sometimes when you have those crunches, it really makes you look at what our staffing is and what our true needs are. Because I went through that 4 million when I was in Iowa. So yeah, we start crunching that, you can really find out where our needs are at. So good question.
Looking at our resignations this year, is that number, because obviously looking at this, that looks really good.
It's low, absolutely.
Yes, is
Yeah.
that, I mean, gonna be fairly locked in at this point? Are we anticipating still?
We're locked in at this point. Any point now, we use this jargon in education, you've probably heard it, suitable replacement. I can let you out of your contract, Matt, if I can find a suitable replacement.
I think one thing just that came to my mind as I'm looking at this is it's going to be really interesting, knowing the economic situation that our country is in right now. If maybe people just aren't as willing to move. I guess, you know, and so maybe they're looking at, you know, I'm happy here and I don't need to move, and so, you know, so it'll be interesting maybe to kind of watch this trend moving forward, because I'm sitting here looking at this thinking, okay, so do we have less, you know, have we replaced all of our older teachers now, and so we have a bunch of younger ones that are happy to be here, or is it other outside forces? So anyway, just something to keep in mind maybe as we look at what's going on.
And we're starting to see that uptick too. It's hard to not talk about this without talking about enrollment. We're seeing that uptick in we're getting registrations right now. And we got 2 from Uganda yesterday. So I mean, things are changing. It's slow. And I think Dr. Rhodes has said a lot. It's gonna be a couple years before we really see it, but it's slowly, kids and families are coming here.
Kevin, do you know from discussions with colleagues how that 10% retention rate kind of compares to statewide trends?
Yeah.
Is it pretty standard?
Yeah, I would say, especially for a class A school. I suppose your smaller schools might be a little bit less.
Yeah, I think actually, I watch that pretty closely, kind of with our area schools, and I've seen more openings at all size schools than I've ever seen. Whether it's neighboring districts or across the state. I think, again, last year's data was 908 that went unfilled. And I think what was reported today is there are currently 950 teacher openings across the state.
Yeah.
And it's 128. That's pretty scary. So I think that 10% is probably a pretty safe number across overall. I want to see, I think I saw a report on a similar size school that was up around 16% on kind of an annual basis.
Right.
So I think we appear to be trending in the right direction with that, but that's just you know, we've got to continue to look at those statistics, and, you know, we want to, you know, it kind of leads nicely into kind of this discussion on strategy 1 and kind of what we do from a standpoint, even though this strategy is around expanded opportunities for students, there is a lot in here that is about what we can do as a district to support all staff, you know, instructional staff, class-wide staff, administrative staff, and those different types of things. So we're very much around conversations right now about, you know, we know there's a teacher shortage. What do we do about the retention of the current, you know, all staff that we have, frankly, because it's kind of crisis across the board. So, as we have visited, the last few months, we had talked again, and I know that we have addressed this in February 2023 is when the 2025 strategic plan was kind of edited, amended, consolidated by the cabinet, and shortly after was brought to the Board of Education. And so we wanted to provide an update that was a little bit more specific. I am going to move through this pretty quickly. If you remember, we have a retirement event this evening. So I want to thank Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson, because they took care of kind of our first specific result. And so what we did with each one of these strategies, we have 3 strategies. We identified specific results for each one of those strategies, and then an action under several actions under each one of those specific results. And so each one of our strategies has 3 specific results. So when we're looking at this idea of being able to provide you know, expanded opportunities for our students, we do start with ensuring different levels of learning experiences for all of our students. And that is really what Mrs. Carlson and Mrs. Douglas talked about earlier, was this idea of how do we get to the place where we have curriculum. And so as we kind of, whoops, I went through. Let's see here. Am I missing my evidence page on strategy 1? So just going through that. First of all, this document will be placed on our website. It will have some live links to it. for some different documents that are associated with each specific result or one of the action steps. And this will be a working document. So we will add strategy 2 and strategy 3 in the coming months. So strategy 2, we'll talk about the April committee of the whole. And then at the May committee of the whole, we will talk about strategy number 3. So when we talk about evidence, that is utilization of a district-defined curriculum, the adoption and implementation of high-quality materials, high leverages practices that maximize learning. And of course, we talked a little bit about the idea of balanced district wide assessment system between what we're doing from a formative summative standpoint locally, and then bring in that state assessment that's all aligned to state standards. So really, Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson talked about 3 of the 4 of those, but I'll just spend a little bit of time on this idea of what we do from, this is really about professional development that impacts opportunities for kids. So, you know, just as we think about this district a little bit, we've done training around the Marzano instructional strategies in the past. Just because we did that several years ago, we continue to discuss those strategies with teachers. Our instructional leaders, our building principals continue to have discussions around the Marzano instructional strategies as well. Then we do all different types of professional development with all folks that positively impact experiences for kids in the classroom. We have a lot of paraprofessional trainings. Mrs. Johnson does workshops and trainings not only with instructional staff and special education staff, but also with paraprofessionals. Our mentoring program is put in place for our mentors to be matched up with a mentee to work on their skills. And sometimes it's just, you know, the function of the way a school day is going to look and kind of what is important to us as a district. Our EL. This past year, we did EL training with all staff in all buildings. Kelly went with Mrs. Douglas and they kind of had a road show that they went to each building. So we had the English learner training that we did with all people. We do substitute training. Mr. Mills does a substitute training as well. So we're always looking at professional development, and we're really looking at moving that to highly collaborative teams across our district. You've heard me talk a little bit about that with professional learning communities, which we're very excited about. But when we really think about that, we talk about our instructional leaders, our building principals, the training they've gone through the last couple of years. Fierce training was brought to them. We'll be doing some training with professional learning communities and being a building leader and what that looks like on those Wednesday afternoons and how you implement and coordinate and then make sure that we have some sustainability with what we're doing during that time as well. You can look over here, our ADCO group, where our district and building administrative team comes together, and that time together is all about collaboration and learning and how we can take back what we're doing during that time to our buildings and have a positive impact on our teachers and in turn have a positive impact on the kids as well. So again, I'm not going to spend time going through the 5 stages as it relates to curriculum. I think Mrs. Douglas and Mrs. Carlson did a really nice job with that. They talked a lot about the timeline on revision of standards and how we go through the adoption process. And then again, the last thing I would mention as it relates to a balanced assessment system. I'm just going to give a shout out. He's not here, but Kyle Kingston is really our data steward in this district. And I approached and TNL approached Kyle probably at the end of last year, maybe this fall, about designing some sort of a program that would be an easy desktop to get to look at common summative assessments, both across the district, whether it be grade level or content area, or something that we could even drill down into buildings. So Kyle has developed a program for us that we can look at specific grades, specific classrooms, and we can see how a 4th grade group did on a common summative assessment. Important tool for what collaborative teams are going to be working on in the future during those Wednesday afternoons and to learn and grow one another. So we're making sure that kids are getting all opportunities that they possibly can. So really excited about that. So specific result, for 1.2 is really all around program. So when and we're blessed in this district, you've said in presentations and we've talked about it, whether it be Sixpence, whether it be Kids Club, we have some awesome programs that are not only, sustaining, but they're growing. But we have our early childhood education program. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have our EL program, which continues to grow and will need to grow as we look at our economic development in this community. Our high ability learner program, both elementary and through the secondary, our extracurricular program, our extended learning opportunities that we do in the summer with some of our elementary students. We'll talk a little bit about the alternative program that we've had at the high school, and then Kids Club, and then also we'll talk about the Bulldog behavior success program that we have at Cody Elementary. So when we look at evidence for those, and we do have this on the presentation, when we look at evidence for these, I would tell you this, there is a lot of analyzing that goes into all the programs. So at the district level, we are always kind of looking into data, and we're always looking at the effectiveness of the program and also the efficiency of the program. And that'll make a little bit more sense as kind of we go through this a little bit, but take early childhood, for instance, you know, that's a passion of mine. We did expand that program, our preschool program for this school year. We added a section to the preschool program. We did not fill our preschool program. And I will take full responsibility of that because census data is indicating that our 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old population is not as large as some of the older age groups in the community right now. Although I think that will be changing. But we're always looking to expand that. But underneath that umbrella, we have our early development network, which continues to grow in support of our little ones across this community. And remember, they serve the birth to 3 population. And we're seeing more referrals in terms of some of the needs and the resources that we can provide. So that continues to be a real strength of our early childhood education program. Sixpence, you heard from our 2 coordinators. They both are really at capacity right now, where other programs across the state not only are not having families or growth of their Sixpence program, they're losing their Sixpence funding through grants and those different types of things. And then of course we have a great partnership with Head Start. So Head Start isn't our program, but we do partner with them on the program that they have at Buffalo. So Mr. Simpson and I we meet with them annually to discuss anything they need in terms of that building, because we know that they have a great obligation to support a portion of our early learners as well. So that's a program that I think will continue to blossom as we go through. Osgood, the half-day program at Osgood will be moving into Buffalo. Again, we look at kind of the effectiveness and the efficiency that our half-days we're not filling up. We have a morning and an afternoon half-day program at Osgood, so we're going to move that in. Jefferson and Washington will keep their preschools in their neighborhood schools for now.
Dr. Rhodes, do we have, so our EDN people that work with our families that are birth to 3, do we have ability then for them to go back like a year later and say, hey, your child's at that age where we need to be looking at preschool?
Oh, I think they're
remind them to be.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
So we actually have a transition plan that we have to do with them. So that's part of the process. So when they turn 2, we already start talking about transition for when they turn 3. So right now, all of our kiddos that have turned 3, we have to transition them by August 31st. So we've already been talking about preschool and what preschool are you going to, and if they're going to a public or private. Because 3-year-olds may have different, there's different heads, or there's different preschools within our community. And so then we connect with those teachers as well. So that's all part of the process that they have to do through their IFSP, their family service plan.
Cool.
Yeah.
When it comes to our EL program, we've added staff in the past 18 months. We are continuing to study that, particularly at kind of the high school level and kind of what's happening there. And we have some nice interest in terms of EL. And one of the really neat things, I mentioned it early, but Kelly Sheets and Mrs. Douglas with kind of the EL professional development. So that isn't just a program in and of itself, but it is really getting out into every classroom and helping teachers, training teachers on how to make sure that we have successful experiences for all our students, including our EL students as well. High ability, there's a lot of different things that has gone on with our high ability program. When you think about this year at the middle schools, high school, we have breakfast clubs that meet very consistently. We have a HAL seminar day that will be upcoming for our elementary students. We've done the E-mission and the I-trailer. The E-mission, I think, was just here a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And then we will have a group of elementary HAL students that'll be going to Aurora, to the Edgerton Explore Center here this spring yet as well. So I think high ability is one of those areas that, again, we're analyzing. I think we feel like we might have the opportunity to expand that a little bit and bring some more programming to our students. In terms of extracurricular program, in the last 18 months, we've added girls wrestling, which has been very, very successful. And we've had our first state qualifier on the girls wrestling team. And then if you've been paying any attention to baseball scores, the North Platte Bulldogs are scoring all kinds of runs.
Yeah.
So they've been extremely successful in the early part of this baseball season. And then the last thing I would mention, FCCLA, although at this point is not a sanctioned activity at the high school, Liz Oldle, one of our FCS teachers at the high school, has put together an FCCLA club with probably the goal to be sanctioned by the FCCLA organization. We've also started an FCCLA club at Adams Middle School as well. So again, we're always looking for activities and athletic opportunities for our students as well. The class program, which was our high school alternative program, that used to be housed at a location, and we had a lease on that location. When the lease came up, we visited with Mr. Spatansky about really what the effectiveness of that program was in terms of alternative education, doing a lot of online work, some one-on-one work with the teachers as well. And so we chose, and Mr. Spatansky wanted to move that in-house at the high school. And of course, with where enrollment is, he had several options to choose in terms of a room. So that program still exists. Looks a little different, but it is at the high school currently. Years ago, we did have an alternative program at Adams Middle School. We did when I was there. I'm doing some research on what happened with that program, why it no longer exists. Madison, when they were a 6th, 7th, 8th building, they also had an alternative program. My assumption is that probably had to do with staffing or lack thereof. So I'm assuming we had some retirements, couldn't find the right person to run that program. But again, as we analyze, those are the things we're looking at. And then that, I'm going to skip down to the elementary program at Cody. We are really in the process right now of analyzing our program at Cody. That brings all potential applicants for the Bulldog Behavior Success to one location, which is at Cody. And so, we have about 5 to 7 students in there right now. We would like to be able to expand that. But again, there's the efficiency part, trying to decide if we expand, that's gonna be a staffing issue. And then, again, to find a behavior interventionist in terms of an endorsement is we're finding is difficult right now as well. But we'd like to see that grow. The idea with that program is to work on social skills and self-regulation, and those students do start to acclimate right back into the classroom. The difficulty is they acclimate back into Cody, and they get very comfortable at Cody, and then the idea is they go back to their home school, and that looks and feels different for those students. So again, we're analyzing that as we go through, but we've had a lot of successful students that have graduated out of that program that may not have been successful if we wouldn't have had it. And I've said this for a long time. I think the shining light of after school programs and summer schools is our kids club program. And everywhere they go to present, they're just it's kind of a mob mentality afterwards, with people trying to get information on how Carrie Linneman and her staff is able to do what they do. But, you know, we have about 300 after-school students that are served through Kids Club currently. Several of our buildings are closed and they're full. They can't from a staffing standpoint, and due to the grant, they can't take any more kids. They'll work with about 175 students on mega days, which generally mega days are aligned with full day PD days throughout our calendar. And they do a variety of things with the students. Sometimes they're at the high school all day doing activities. And then the last thing is kind of our summer program that we have for Kids Club. And they do a lot around life skills, around entrepreneurship, career exploration. That Carrie and her staff actually get groups of kids out to businesses during the summertime. And then the last thing is they have a lot of STEM activities, and that is most of that. Some of that is funded through the
Beyond School Bells.
Beyond School Bells, which we just submitted another application for next year. So a little bit about programming, and then the last strategy in terms of our specific result for expanded opportunities for all our students is really that college and career readiness. So if you remember, we've gone through some turnovers that related to our career coach at the high school. And so when we had a resignation from the individual that was our career coach, that fell into kind of the lap of our counseling department. And so last year, we had one of our guidance counselors that was trying to do academic interns and be a guidance counselor at the high school. And then, oh, by the way, we only had 3 guidance counselors instead of 4 because of staffing. So we're very fortunate, and I know that you heard from Tracy Foster, I believe in December, when she talked a little bit about the internship program and kind of the growth. One of the things I really appreciate that Mrs. Foster has done is she's really started to formalize what that looks like. She's really developed new relationships with different businesses. We've got a lot of new businesses coming to our community, and Mrs. Foster is reaching out to those businesses. So we're getting more students out into our community in terms of internships. I really believe that we've grown in the last 18 months, and I think it's probably going to continue to blossom. Mrs. Carlson, Mrs. Foster, and I meet with Terry to start to talk about the school business partnership and really kind of getting that back on its feet. You know, COVID really kind of put a halt to that. So we're really looking at continuing to develop that. Of course, when we look at opportunities for our students, we know that our students have the opportunity based on kind of what their achievement is like and their work ethic, that they can take enough dual credit and college credit to get an associate's degree at the same time they're getting a high school degree. And so we do offer a lot of different dual credits. The other thing that is really exciting at the high school is we review course proposals and have kind of this time of year, kind of once the calendar is turned. So our instructors at the high school are looking at different learning opportunities for our students as well. And those come to Mrs. Carlson, and then we visit a little bit about, you know, first of all, do we have the staff to do it? Do we have the numbers of students that want to take it? It's kind of that efficiency and they do a really good job of outlining every component of that new course that they would like to offer. And then sometimes we approve that course and sometimes we don't, but we have some very creative folks across the district. In terms of our academies, you know, we do work with mid-times. When we look at our welding academy and our construction academy, the two areas that still I think a lot about are the health sciences academy and the education academy, and we'll continue to have conversations along those routes as well. And then the last two are kind of programming, but they are around, you know, career and college readiness. And that is Project Surge that we have had for high school students, and then the transition house as well. So just to let you know a little bit in terms of analyzing Project Surge. So I believe that Project Surge was implemented in 08-09. I think it was my last year at Adams Middle School. And so we have had Project Surge and we've had a partnership with community on Project Surge from that time on. At the initial point, it was with Walmart distribution centers solely. And then for the last several years, the distribution center is involved, but it's been more mid-planes, and then it's been some more on-job training and coaching and those different types of things. So again, we looked at effectiveness, and it is an effective program, but then we looked at the efficiencies and what our students need for programming. And we had determined that for this school year, we just, from a staffing, from the numbers of students that would be in that program, that we could meet the needs of those students and put them in a successful situation without Project Surge. So we have not had Project Surge this school year. Some of those students have transitioned into the transition house, and they do some job related on-job training and some of those different types of things, which is really the neat thing about the transition house. You know, they certainly do some things at the high school, but when it comes to life skills and those different types of things, that's done out the house. And then they have job coaches that they go out all over the community, and they work for different employers, and then they're learning the job skills. So that's the college and career readiness. And I'm sorry that I rushed through that, but again, we will post this on the website. We will have links. We've got some links to our professional development handbook and some of those different types of things. We'll bring strategy 2 back in April, and we will add that to this document that'll be posted on the website then.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
any questions real quick? Okay, if not, motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call?
Skip Ballford,
Aye.
Matthew Peterson.
Aye.
Emily Garrett.
Aye.
Marilyn Reed.
Aye.
Cindy O'Connor.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yep.